very, very dangerous.
Get these spidey sense, I was like, oh, something's off.
And I'm just like, man, I'm waiting to hear something,
Keep that crowd warmed up. Is Mr. Yahola Tiger.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to the 9th episode. Took a little bit of a break last week. I got some, I guess you could say, life things. Life happens. But I'm going to be pretty short and sweet with this one. So this past week, I've definitely been watching a lot of true crime on Netflix. And I know this first documentary that I watched, it's called Girl in the Picture. It was pretty big on social media, mainly, especially here in Oklahoma, especially when it came to it being located in Tulsa, Choctaw, and in I think another small town I can't think of it right now. But man, that was pretty crazy because like the guy took basically this guy took kids and changed their name, identity, basically kidnapped them and brainwashed them into, this, doing things, and, pretty wild guy. And the dude looked crazy, but, it all starts off with this girl, and she has multiple different names. Like, some people knew her as Sharon, some people knew her as Tanya. Like, she had different names, and she ends up dead. Like, end up kind of off to the side of the road, dead. And they couldn't find out who was the person that was, killed her. And it was an unsolved case for a long time. Well, then she had a son, and basically her son was put into foster care, and this old man who was allegedly the murdered woman or the killed woman, the hit and run girl, that was her husband. Well, that he claimed that that's his son. So he goes to court and they do the DNA test. Well, come to find out he's not his son. And so the kid gets put in foster care and gets adopted out to this family, this really nice family who's, helped a lot of kids over the years. And he ends up, the kid ends up going to school one day, and this is what's wild about this, is this, the older guy who was married to the hit and run woman with the son, kidnaps the son at school, holds the principal at gunpoint, drives him out in the middle of nowhere, Choctaw, Oklahoma, and strips him butt naked and ties him to a tree. And they're and then he takes off with the young boy, which is wild. But I won't give it away. I'm not going to tell the entire story. But there's a lot of I guess you say explicit, kind of sexual, I don't want to say deviancy, but that's exactly what it is. This dude's crazy, and the level of trying to cover your tracks is just craziness. But that one's called Girl in the Picture. So people my age, we were around when it first, when the internet first started, quote unquote, going viral. And this next documentary that I watched, True Crime, was about a guy named Kai, the hatchet wielding hitchhiker. And I remember this guy back in, like I said, 2013, I believe. Because he's the guy, if you remember that, he saved the woman from this guy who was high on whatever. Basically, so the story goes, I'll just rewind it. Whatever. I'll just tell it from the beginning. I ain't gonna give y'all no spoilers though. But so one day, there's a guy, he's driving with a hitchhiker, and they crash into basically it's a service electrician's truck, and pins a guy into the truck, and the guy at the wheel is saying a whole bunch of crazy stuff, racist, basically saying he's God. And that he can control life. Well, there's a woman, a couple women really, but one woman is trying to really help. So she is trying to assist, trying to just be, a good Samaritan and help. And the guy fights her off and basically beats her up, and then another chick comes in and beats her up, and the passenger of the car comes out and saves this woman's life because this guy was going to choke this woman to death. Saves her life by using an axe or a hatchet and beats him over the head. And that's where the story starts. And it goes viral. He basically, gets interviewed by this local kind of a news station, and it goes viral. And the part of the quote that I remember the most is where he's like, "Yo, there was this dude. He came up and he grabbed the woman, and I said, smash, smash, smash." And so if you guys remember that viral video, that's what that's about. And to me, what transpires, what's transpires over the next, literally this documentary takes, course over 3 months. Like, from the time that viral video drops, 3 months later, this dude's life has totally changed. And it's totally crazy. Like, the amount of, publicity and, I guess you could say fame that this homeless guy who had all these problems, that no one knew of, he was spouting off, like in his interview, that, everyone deserves respect. Everyone deserves to be loved. And so it's crazy, the jump that he makes and what happens to him. And that one is called Kai, the Hatchet Wielding Hitchhiker, and that's on Netflix as well. So the topic today, I've had I've had a few people, kind of reach out to me and, asking me if I've seen the Paranormal Rangers episode on Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation. And I haven't. I eventually watched it, for this episode, but I had been researching these guys for quite a long time, and they're known as the Navajo Rangers. It's and I may butcher their names, but it's Stan Milford and Jonathan Redbird Dover, and they have been giving talks for kind of around different paranormal conferences and whatnot for quite a bit of time, like maybe 3, 4, 5, even 7 years. And I heard about these guys from I don't know how I caught it, but it was a paranormal conference that went live on YouTube back about 5, 7 years ago. And I had caught Jonathan Dover's presentation. And so how they started was in 2000, basically in the year 2000. They were both given to a special projects group. Both, federal, got federal ties, a lot of training. They, are very good police guys, detectives. They worked in homicide. Like, they did a lot of stuff in their career before this special projects assignment that they were given. And, in 2000 they were put together, and they had been solving and, investigating paranormal cases. This is, Jonathan Dover's retired, but Stan Milford, I think he's still going, which, shout out to Stan Milford. He's from Tahlequah. I was like, man, because when I heard that, I said, oh yeah, I knew he was a real one. No, but I had heard about these guys for a while, and so, one thing I found was so interesting about them is the fact that they cover things that are not really talked about. Like, if you typed in on YouTube right now, Native American folklore stories, or whatever that phrase that you can use, it's a lot of people that aren't in the culture and a lot of people that are not native speaking on native topics. And one thing I think that they both do really good job is that they know what they're doing, they know what they're talking about, and they've experienced it. And to me, it's so fascinating, especially with the kind of stuff that they were doing. And they got their start in 2000. Well, their first case was a Bigfoot case, and they investigated it. Basically, what they did is they tracked this animal all the way out to this creek, and came across basically it was like a bundle of hair on the barbed wire, and they went and took it and got it DNA tested, and basically the only thing that came back was a possible carnivore, unknown carnivore, which I was listening to people ask questions to him. And they said, what does that mean? And he goes, I don't know. I'm not. He just kind of laughs and I'm not the lab guy, which makes sense. I mean, you're just basically sending it off. But I thought it was really interesting. Because he just when they sent that in, and there's been other people that have sent in hair samples and alleged feces samples, and it's come back kind of weird. Some people's gotten back normal animal, but it's always an unknown species type of thing. And I thought it was really interesting that he sent it in on their first case. And so they basically did Bigfoot investigations, skinwalker or shapeshifter, hauntings, and then UFOs. And as you get down the line, one thing that I really like that they do, and I know this topic is really kind of sensitive in some aspects, and and Stan and Jonathan both, they also they do say that we are not traditional. We were not raised traditional. We have learned these things, and these things bother everybody. And they go. Jonathan Dover really goes into talking about what a skinwalker actually is. Because one thing I see on TikTok and Facebook Reels, Instagram Reels, is that people think everything's a skinwalker, especially non-natives. And skinwalkers are specifically, they are specifically to one thing or to something. He talked about a case in a interview that I watched with, and I can't remember the name of the interview, but shout out to, I think it's that guy's name was, I can't remember anyways, but, he does an interview and he said, basically that a lot of the problems with this stuff that's going on these reservations is that young people are learning this medicine, but they're not learning why or how or what to do or anything. And they're just using this medicine to basically benefit off of it. And, Jonathan and Stan talked about a young guy who was in a group of skinwalkers. Like they all had their own little meeting, like they were their own kind of gang almost. And they said that they met at different specific points. But basically what happened was one of the kids learned how to do this from a relative, and he ended up sharing it and showing his best friends on how to do this. And one thing about medicine, you're chosen to do this. You just don't give it to anybody, and that's kind of what they said. Jonathan and Stan, they said this was given inappropriately to these other kids, and they were shown this, and this I guess they call it Navajo witchcraft, but that's what they call it. I just call it medicine. Is it's not always for you. And one thing that that with that group is they start terrorizing the community. They did it for fun. They pulled pranks. They'd mess with girlfriends, other friends. They would they'd steal stuff and they turn into these different animals. Well, one day, the church door, that was the local church, Presbyterian church to be exact, is how it was described. The doors were open. It was real hot that summer. And Jonathan describes this kid hearing this. He goes, "Oh, what is that?" So he walks in the church, and the kid sits in the back row and just kind of hangs out, and in the church. And he starts to realize, he's like, "No, I want to do this. I feel a part of this." And the kid becomes a Christian. Well, he goes home, and he was out with his buddies one night, and they were like, "Hey man, let's go do this. We got something to do tonight. Let's go do this." And they go to change, to shift basically. And the boy that accepted Christ couldn't. He couldn't do it from now on because he was another way now. And he tried and tried and tried, and he told that's just what it was told to Jonathan and Dover and Stan Milford that he couldn't turn anymore. He couldn't use that because he was another way. So I thought it's stories like that, that are never really shared, and another thing I thought was, another story that really hit me kind of hard, and I think about this as pertains to some stories here in Oklahoma. There's a couple, and this is a story that Jonathan Dover and I think Jonathan Dover and Stan both told. Mr. Milford's told. But they were coming home. There was a couple that were coming home, and they looked up and they said, "There's something in our chicken coop. It looked like coyote." So the husband runs in there, grabs a gun, and shoots it. And he sees this coyote-looking thing take off into the wood, off into the kind of darkness. Well, he follows it. He follows the blood and kind of keeps walking, and he looks in this bush, and he said he said, "Oh, it's just a coyote. Well, I'm gonna go drag it and discard of the body." Well, he basically picked the coyote up by its hind legs, and as he was dragging it, the coyote turned into a human, and it wasn't really human, but it was humanoid. And he looked and he dropped it, and he said, "Oh my God, I just shot somebody." He calls the husband calls 911. He also calls the Navajo Rangers and everybody, Navajo police, and they take this thing. I guess is how Jonathan described it. This man told what this thing looked like. He said it looked human, but it wasn't quite human. Like it was still in between, almost. And the police, the non-native police, was like, "Oh, we're going to pass this over to Navajo policemen." So they take this thing, they take him to the hospital, and they work on this person thing. And the husband said, when the Navajo Rangers got there, the husband was like, "I think I know that guy. He just didn't look right though. Just didn't quite look, how I thought he would look, or how he was supposed to look." And so they take the report down, and they take him to the station and question him, and basically just get the full story, and basically that person that he shot, it was going to live, it was going to be all right. And the couple asked, Mr. Dover, and they were like, "Well, what are we supposed to do? What if it comes back and hurts us? What if this guy comes back and hurts?" He says, and so how the legend goes is if someone's a skinwalker or shapeshifter, you go to their front door and let them know you let them know who they are, and you tell them. And usually they'll die. Like how it goes is usually die within a certain period of time. It could be a week, month, whatever it is. But I've heard that too as well. When I was sitting there, I was like, "Dang, that's some real knowledge right there." But that's what they told me. It said, okay, and so they had power back. They took the power back of this being. But essentially, what it was they found out it was a neighbor who was real jealous of how many chickens he had. And what he was going to do was kill and eat some of those chickens and take some for himself. And so, those cases like that, to me are so fascinating because it's like, it reminds me of my childhood and growing up and being told stories of that happened to my relatives. So Mom Scott, who is my grandmother, multiple great grandmother, and they used to have a house out in Eufaula. If you guys have been out to, if you guys went to the Eufaula Canadian tribal town storytelling back in October, that same house is where we had that storytelling. Is where I'm describing this story now. Is where it happened, and my uncle now owns it. My Uncle John Mark Tiger. He's an artist, and shout out to him. He's always out and about. Following him on Facebook, but he's out there now. But back in the day, there was this dog that used to come around and play with the kids, and Mom Scott would always kind of shoo it off, and that's what we called her. That's what they called her. I wasn't alive when she was around, but that's what they would call her. And she'd shoo them off. Get out of here. Well, one day those kids really loving on that dog, really just, oh yes, scratching him behind the ears, and he's all, yeah. I mean, when that dog went to open its mouth, it had a gold tooth. And they shoot him off, and they was thinking it was probably a neighbor or somebody like that. But that stuff has been around for a long time when it comes to that type of medicine. Now the lore on that is very wide ranging. I was told, and I'm not going to divulge on exactly what the practices were, but I've been told of what it takes to do that, and how many, what you got to do in terms of, to do these things. But Stan and Jonathan, they divulged a little bit of that information. I'm going to tell you that this now. This is according to Navajo beliefs. But eventually, you have to hurt a loved one. Is one of the trials. You have to be buried is another one, and you have to do certain things. And I'm not, like I said, I'm going to tell those two, but I'm not going to go any more into that, because that's I don't want to disrespect anybody or or say anything that may come across any type of way like I'm giving away some stuff, but they would do these things, and one thing that they really had a lot of those cases is what they said. They said that in the Netflix version, but they also said that in interviews that they said most of about 2% of their cases were those shapeshifter type cases, and I just find it real crazy that that they had been divulged that type of information, and they sharing it to the world. And I've read some of the comments of non-natives, and they're like, man, this is, baloney meat, this is terrible, this stuff doesn't happen in real life. And, eventually I'm going to get to the Girl Scout murders. I'm going to do a review of a documentary. I'm not going to talk about the personal things and of that nature. I'm just going to stick to the facts and what we know. I'm not, and I may divulge in some some of my assumptions, but it's similar to that. That documentary, I saw a lot of people just kind of saying, oh, that stuff is not real. And for me, it's very real. I believe in it. I live my life as if, those things could have happened. And, it took a long time for me to think that way. I mean, I guess I'm only 28 years old, but still, as you get older and you have kids, you kind of really start thinking about those things. And they discuss a haunting case that's real, kind of spooky. But basically, they were in this old. It kind of reminded me of this building. Kind of reminded me of Pawnee IHS Hospital, because it was not similar, but the same things weren't happening, but it was the same type of hauntings where people would hear like voices in their ear, or someone felt like someone was breathing on them, or like stuff would be tossed around or moved. But when Stan was in there, He had 4 of his other guys, or 3 other guys in there with him, so 4 total. And they're kind of looking around, and they started feeling like quarters were starting to be tossed out, like quarters and dimes. And one crazy thing is they had a European British pound come out of nowhere. And Stan's buddy, who he had with him, I think it might have been his cousin, literally saw the coin coming at him, and it like almost went through him and then hit him in the back in this building. And I can't remember what building it was, but it was on Navajo Reservation. And but basically, yeah, it was coming at him, and it went through him, is how he described it, and it hit him in the back, and it fell to the ground. But him and Jonathan both, for a while, were finding quarters and dimes and nickels and different type of coins showing up all over the place, which I found that to be real kind of interesting. But there's a myriad of other things, like they dealt with UFO investigations, and some of those are pretty interesting because they kind of connect to a couple shapeshifter type things. Crazy story that happened to Stan when he had saw like an orb come over the car, and they looked up and there was nothing there. Well, then they got out some type of special not kaleidoscope, but some type of infrared type thing, and he could see something right above where they said that they saw that. I guess it'd be like an orb or something, but basically it was up there where they thought where it kind of passed. And another kind of weird occurrence was they saw an orb, and then all of a sudden they looked out the left hand side, and there was some type of greyhound looking, coyote looking thing running next to them. And they didn't know what it was, and they thought it was kind of strange, and they kept they went up to like 65 miles an hour, and it was still running next to them. And Jonathan Dover goes into a story, this is a crazy story, and I was like, and I really shook me out. But he, a farmer was checking his fence lines one night when it was getting dark, and I think he might have told us in the interview with this guy, which there's an interview I listened to for an hour, and this guy it's a non-native interviewer, and Jonathan Dover's trying to tell him information. This dude's just kept joking around and trying to get Jonathan to laugh, and I'm just like, man, come on, like let him tell, like he's telling some heat right now. But the farmer's checking his fence line, kind of getting late, and he looks out and he's kind of going about 45 miles an hour, just making sure nothing's down. And he described the same way that Stan Milford did. Basically, it was like a greyhound / coyote looking thing. It was real hairy. It was kind of hairy, but it was longer than a coyote, and it was running. Well, the farmer, he's like, man, what is that? So he's speeding up because the speed limit's changing, and he's going faster. He's going about 55, and he went up to 60, and this thing was still next to him. Well, the farmer slows down, shoots this thing. And he gets out, and he swerves, gets out, and goes and checks on it because he shoots it dead to, not dead to rights, but, basically in the knee where it couldn't get away. And he looks in, it was a little girl. About a teenage girl. And they said they reported to the Navajo Rangers, but he never heard. And that's one thing too that I wish that these guys, once they get put off the case and they quote unquote solve the case, or they figure out what's going on, or try to get help for these people, they don't follow up. And that's why I'm like, man, I wish they would follow up, because I was curious on what happened to that girl, if she died, or if that man, what happened to him. But I just find it real interesting. But we're running up on almost 30 minutes for this episode. We had a little bit of a hiatus last week, but hopefully this episode, I know, like I said, I had some people reach out to me, and I hope this episode, did justice to those guys, those Paranormal Rangers. They to me, they're the real deal. A lot of the information, I'm like, man, this could be related back to here in Oklahoma. But I'm going to tell one last story, kind of a story that came to mind when we were talking about this. Me and my dad were talking about these Rangers. Is we used to kind of get messed with, and that'll be something I tell down the line. It may be 6 months from now, maybe a year, maybe 2, but I'll go into full detail about it and kind of give a more clear timeline. I've told this story. I've told some of these stories on Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation, which go like, subscribe, listen, follow, whatever, do everything. Go check us out over there. But we used to live in this trailer when I was a little guy, like young, like a baby. And it was out on, over there kind of by, I think it was by the stadium is how my dad described it. NSU Stadium, Northeastern State University Stadium. And one day my dad saw 2 skunks about, the size of a dog. And, that's one thing about that medicine that's kind of real, to me it's real spooky, real eerie, because a lot of times it could be an omen. They could just be saying, hey, I'm watching you, I know I'm around, letting you know I'm around. I ain't going to do nothing to you today, I'm not going to do nothing to you tomorrow, but I'm just letting you know I'm around. And my dad would see those things out there because we had some things going on. But I appreciate you guys listening to this episode. Let me know what you guys think about the outro music. Shady music. I'm not going to give who that person is. He wanted to remain anonymous. But let me know what you think about the outro music. And you can go follow me on TikTok, One Man Band 918, Facebook, Yahola Tiger, YouTube, Warcry Podcast. It's available on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, or Google Podcasts, iHeart Podcast, Apple Podcasts. We're going to be adding more as we go, or I'm going to be adding more as we go, or as I go. I'm going to try to line up some interviews. We're going to, that's something that's coming down the pipeline, is trying to get that worked out, and hopefully, like I said, we can get this thing rolling. I know Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation is on a hiatus, but we'll be back. But like I said, guys, I appreciate you guys listening in, and I'll catch you on the next one.